all. Cause I'm just going to pray. The disbelievers going to hate. Habibi, I'm just going to shake. Shake it off.
Hi guys, Ted here, Shake It Off's Christian friend. If you've been following the adventures of Shake It Off, you will by now have found out some pretty disturbing information about Islam and its founder, Muhammad.
Hey Ted, I'd like you to meet Muhammad, the founder of Islam.
Muhammad, aren't you the guy who often has semen all over your clothes and then gets your 9-year-old child bride to scrape it off?
You better believe it.
Anyway, we were wondering if you wanted to convert to Islam due to the fact the Quran has been perfectly preserved, right down to the letter.
Islam. Isn't that the religion that calls for the death of apostates, blasphemers, homosexuals, promotes practices like child marriage, sex slavery, wife beating, and female genital mutilation? And which also calls for the violent subjugation of non-believers in countries under Sharia law if they refuse to convert to Islam or pay Muslims a tax.
I like this guy. He's done his research.
The important thing to remember is that a lot of Muslims, especially in the West, don't know this information or adhere to what Islam really teaches because they've never read or studied their own books. Taking out loans...
The question posed by Brother Ali from USA is that he wants to buy a house, and for him it's only possible if he takes it on a mortgage loan that is based on interest. As far as interest is concerned, there are no less than 8 places in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly specifies about riba, and he says in most of these places that riba is haram. And Allah further says in the Quran, in Surah Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse number 278 and 279, that if you give up not your demands of riba, then take notice of a vow from Allah and His Rasul. That means Allah says in the Quran that if you give up not your demands of riba, Allah and His Rasul will wage a war against you. And according to Imam Adhabi, he places riba as the 12th major sin in Islam.
So we get people, and mortgage, by the way, is a riba-based loan. It's an interest-based loan taken from a conventional bank or a financial institution. You want this property $1 million, you pay us 1.5. What is the 0.5? It's interest.
You find in the Western countries people giving their own opinions, their own views, which is not matching with Quran and Sunnah. And our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, said that there are various levels of riba. And the lowest level is equivalent to doing zina with your mother. Imagine how grave major sin is taking riba.
So some people, scholars, quote unquote, who justify this, and they say the Hanafi school of thought say that you can deal with haram in the lands of kufr, etc., and they give lame excuses and justifications.
Taking riba is haram. It's a major sin, and Allah is very clear-cut in the Quran, and there are various hadith which has prohibited a person from taking riba.
To buy a property with mortgage, with interest-based loans, it's a major sin. It's a sin that Allah curses the one who gives the interest, which is you, the one who takes it, which is the bank, the one who witnesses it, and the one who just registers it, like the clerks.
Celebrating birthdays.
Celebrating birthdays. This is, in the vast majority of Muslims who are not practicing, is a normal thing. They tell you that this is not part of their religion, and there's nothing wrong in it. We say it is not part of their religion, but it is part of their customs. So you are imitating the disbelievers. Something the Prophet did not do, alayhi salatu wasalam, or his companions, or the tabi'een, or the tabi'it tabi'een. Picking it up and adopting it is inappropriate for a Muslim. It's sinful.
Celebrating birthday per se is not permitted in Islam, whether even if it includes activities which are Islamic, celebrating per se is not permitted. And as I mentioned earlier, that with most of the birthdays that we have today, it is associated with shirk, associated with un-Islamic activities, with music, with dance. That's the reason my advice to the Muslim brothers and sisters, to the Muslim children, is that we should stay away from such cultures which are against Islam, against the teaching of the Quran and the Sunnah, and we should not celebrate these annual events which is not part of the Islamic culture and Islamic teaching. Hope that answers the question.
Life, our lives, is a big picture. Islam is a frame. In Islam, we're told to put this frame and cut all the loose edges from the sides of our lives. So we have to cut all our desires, or our wishes and habits and customs and hobbies that go out of the frame of Islam. Once we do this, Islam fits like a glove over our lives, and we are properly considered to be proper practicing pious Muslims. If you fail to do this, you're not a proper Muslim. You're not a practicing Muslim.
Listening to music,
When the Prophet says, alayhi salatu wasalam, that music is haram as per the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sunan Abi Dawood and other many hadiths, no Muslim in his right mind would say, why? Because he is objecting to the Prophet's ruling, alayhi salatu wasalam. So if your friend is not satisfied by the evidences you've showed him, leave him alone and move on to befriend others and unfriend this person, because he's not a real proper Muslim who's willing to accept. There's a difference between someone who says, yes, I know it's haram, but I'm weak, I'm listening to it, I love it. Okay, he's sinful. But someone who keeps on objecting and why? This is not a person to consider as a friend, and Allah knows best.
many of these things are considered haram, but in Western nations, Muslims don't seem to realize or don't seem to care. Many, but not all, Muslims in the West follow a watered-down version of Muhammad and his teachings, which bear virtually no resemblance of the violent and perverted figure and his commands that we find throughout the most authentic Islamic sources. Remember, Islam is the religion. A Muslim is an individual. Just because they identify as Muslim, it does not mean they follow what Islam teaches. Much the same way as many people call themselves Christians, but do not adhere to the teachings of Jesus, and therefore do not adhere to the teachings of Christianity. But Ted, if a lot of Muslims don't know the truth about Muhammad or what Islam really teaches, why bother talking about it or sharing information with them? I'm glad you asked. If you've watched either of these videos, you'll by now understand the real Islam teaches its followers to spread the religion through violence, namely through offensive jihad, when Muslims are in the majority.
The other type of jihad is the one that everyone trying to hide. And it's called jihadul talab. And this means that the jihad of pursuing, running after. But this jihad cannot be accomplished, cannot take place unless the state of the Muslims is strong. If you don't have a strong Muslim country, who can they pursue or attack?
What you can expect when this happens is a knock on your door and 3 options.
Number 1, to call them to Islam. If they refuse, then tell them Allah obliged upon you to pay taxation, jizya. If they refuse, then we have to fight. And if we fight you, then we capture you, you become our slaves, and we take your land, and you take where, because you refuse, I give you 2 good options. This is the strength of Islam.
Once in power, they will then culturally enrich us by implementing the barbaric Sharia law, which imposes penalties such as death for apostates, death for homosexuals, stoning for adultery, and allows practices such as child marriage, wife beating, and so on. Given Islam is the fastest growing religion, due to high birth rates, because it gives women nothing better to do than be married off as children and turned into baby-making machines, and then stops people from leaving by imposing a death penalty for apostasy. It's only a matter of time before you and your family in the future are violently subjugated in the name of Allah. When you are, your nice Muslim friend or their family won't be there to save you from those in charge. Sounds pretty grim, right? But what if something were to change? What if Muslims started leaving Islam faster than it was growing and Islam never became the majority world religion? And that's where I step in to help guide you on how to share facts about Islam and Muhammad with your Muslim friend. Facts about Islam and Muhammad that will have your Muslim friend buying a one-way ticket to ex-Muslim world. If you've been watching this series, you may find that the information shared sometimes comes across in a blunt, provocative and aggressive way, which may not be palatable for all Muslims. Given that success on YouTube is driven through engagement, this is done intentionally. The outrage sparks likes, comments and shares, and this in turn helps get the information spread across the globe. But what about a one-on-one conversation with your pleasant Muslim friend who knows none of this information? How should you approach things with them? Well, I'm going to show you how to have those conversations, but to start with, I'm going to show you what not to do. Mo, shake it off. Quick question for you both. Why did your sick, grubby prophet often have semen stains all over his clothes? What a freak. Hey fellas, you know that Muhammad guy you follow? I was reading he was the victim of a magic spell, thought he was possessed, and also repeatedly intended to commit suicide. Sounds to me like he belongs in a psych ward rather than at the head of a religious movement. Boys, did you know your so-called Prophet Muhammad used to have sex with all 9 of his wives in one night and then take just a single bath afterwards? Imagine the stench that would be coming off the filthy pervert when he made it to wife number 9. Hey guys, I was reading that the creepy, perverted prophet you both follow would talk about fondling young virgins with his followers and had sex with a prepubescent 9-year-old girl called Aisha. Should we all be hiding our daughters from you guys too, given you take this pedophile as the perfect moral example? So, how should you approach these conversations with your Muslim friends? Slowly, respectfully, and with curiosity. Most Muslims will love discussing their faith and sharing information about it with you if you're genuinely interested. Hey Mo, hey, shake it off. I hope you've been well. I've been looking into Islam off the back of our discussions, but I have to admit, I'm a little bothered by Muhammad's relationship with his wife Aisha. I mean, look, I don't know if it's true, but from what I was reading, he married her at just 6 years of age and consummated the marriage at 9 years of age. It just seems she was a little young and it doesn't sit well with me. Do you know why Muhammad had to marry her so young? Remember, your Muslim friend may or may not know this information, so be patient and understanding. If they know this information, they may have a response ready.
Hey, Ted. We've been well, thank you. And hope you have been too. I'm glad you raised this, as it's a common misconception. Aisha was actually a very mature 9-year-old girl, and getting married at this age was perfectly normal in the 7th century Arabia. Besides, due to the warm climate, Aisha matured a lot faster than most girls do nowadays. She also had a wonderful memory, so Muhammad had to marry her in order to make sure all the stories of his life were preserved.
Be gracious, accept the information, and leave the door open to a future conversation. Thank you, Mo, that's really insightful. I never knew any of that. I'll look into this further. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain that to me. Maybe we can talk about it again once I've researched it a bit further, so you can help me out if I have any additional questions.
No worries, Ted. And yes, please do go and look into it further, and you'll see I'm correct. May the Almighty Allah guide you.
From here, you can have follow-up conversations with your Muslim friend and share more information they may not know. Hey guys, so I was looking into Muhammad's relationship with Aisha off the back of our conversations, and I had some further questions off the back of my research. Would you mind if we went through them together?
Of course, Ted. We'd be happy to. What questions do you have?
Well, I know that you mentioned Aisha was a very mature 9-year-old when Muhammad consummated the marriage with her, but it says in your hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari 3894 that she was actually playing on a swing set just before she was handed over to Muhammad at 9 years old. And according to Sahih Muslim 3481, and Sunan and Nasai 3380. Aisha was also still playing with dolls at this age. This is also confirmed in Sahih al-Bukhari 6130. Now, I've also been reading images are forbidden in Islam, and that dolls fall in this category, unless of course you are prepubescent. So my first question is, why was Aisha allowed to play with dolls if she was a mature and grown-up 9-year-old?
Ha 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 ha. You must be mistaken. Images, including dolls, aren't forbidden, and Aisha was mature. She just had a doll collection. You know some people collect coins or stamps. Well, the mature Aisha collected dolls, ha ha ha.
Okay. So why then in Sahih al-Bukhari 6130? Sahih al-Bukhari being your most trusted hadith collection. Do your scholars add that playing with dolls and similar images is forbidden, but that it was allowed for Aisha at this time as she was just a little girl who hadn't reached puberty?
Ha 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 ha. That one must be a typo.
Okay, well then, why is it that in Sahih al-Bukhari 5133, the chapter is titled, Giving One's Young Children in Marriage is Permissible? And why do your scholars then quote a Quran verse, Surah 65 verse 4, that talks about marriage and sex with prepubescent girls before then proceeding to talk about Muhammad's relationship with Aisha? It reads to me like they're using Muhammad and Aisha's relationship as an example of the Quran verse allowing men to marry and have sex with prepubescent girls being put into practice.
No, no, no. You have it all wrong. There's no such verse in the Quran. That's not what it's talking about. When Allah mentions girls who haven't menstruated yet, what Allah really means is girls who haven't menstruated yet, due to a rare medical condition, despite having reached puberty.
Right, so if this verse isn't implying marriage and sex with prepubescent girls is permissible in Islam, why is it then, when I read all of the commentary of your most trusted scholars on this verse throughout history, they all say this is talking about girls who have not yet reached puberty due to their young age, not due to some rare medical condition? Ibn Abbas even gives the historical background, saying someone specifically asked about the iddah or waiting period for those who haven't reached menstruation as they are too young. If this wasn't allowing men to marry and then have sex with prepubescent girls, why didn't Allah simply rebuke the person asking the question and say this wasn't allowed?
Well, yes, now you mention it. I forgot about that. My apologies. The verse does allow marriage with prepubescent girls, but sex isn't allowed until they reach puberty, and the marriage is done through parental consent. It doesn't really happen nowadays anyway. If it did, it would be an advantage for the young girl, as she will have a loving, family-oriented husband to take care of her.
Okay. The thing is, this verse is talking about an iddah or waiting period that men must observe before having sex with their wives. The purpose of this waiting period is to ensure the woman isn't pregnant so that paternity of the potential offspring can be determined easily. The Quran also states in Surah 33 verse 49 that no iddah or waiting period is required if intercourse hasn't taken place in the marriage. So no iddah is required if the marriage hasn't been consummated. But there is an iddah for prepubescent girls, meaning that it's permissible for a man to have sex with a prepubescent girl in Islam.
I think you're taking these verses out of context. No matter what you say, it doesn't mean that. We need to be careful how we interpret Allah's words.
Okay, so if I'm taking these verses out of context, why is it that Islamic scholar Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi agrees with exactly what I just said? When talking about this Quran verse, Maududi states, therefore, making mention of the waiting period for the girls who have not yet menstruated clearly proves that it is not only permissible to give away the girl in marriage at this age, but it is also permissible for the husband to consummate marriage with her. Now, obviously, no Muslim has the right to forbid a thing which the Quran has held as permissible.
Ha ha ha. Would you buy that this is just another typo?
I'm sorry to say, Mo, but no, I'm not buying that. And looping back to an earlier point, I also thought Muhammad was supposed to be the perfect moral example for all time, not just 7th century Arabia. Muslims are, after all, using his example as a precedent for their marriages today, despite the fact you said this isn't occurring. I was reading a BBC article the other month about a man in Somalia marrying an 8-year-old girl. When asked by the BBC how he justified marrying an 8-year-old, Sheikh Mahmoud said that the traditions of Islam's Prophet Muhammad, along with that of the Shafi'i school of thought, allowed child marriage. So should we be following this practice or not? I'm a little confused.
Ha 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 ha. Muhammad is the perfect moral example for all time. There are just certain practices he participated in that need to be observed with context. And also, School of Shafi definitely doesn't allow child marriage. I would know. I follow the Shafi school of thought.
Right, okay, so why is it then that when I open Reliance of the Traveller, which is a Sharia manual from the Shafi school of thought, is there a section on marrying virgins to men without consent? And why is it that it says it's only recommended, that's right recommended, not compulsory, to ask for the woman's consent if she has reached puberty, implying that if she hasn't reached puberty, there's no need to ask permission. After all, silence is considered consent.
Ha 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 ha. Look, Ted, I'm really enjoying these conversations. But let's park this topic for next time. It's getting pretty late in the day now.
Late in the day, it's 7 a.m. in the morning.
Okay, so maybe that was overkill. And perhaps I was getting a little patronizing towards the end. But you get the idea. You don't need to bombard your Muslim friend with all that information in one session. But if you can slowly drip feed this information through in consecutive discussions, you will slowly expose them to things they have never heard about Muhammad or the Quran before. Over time, this information will compound, and your Muslim friend will begin to wonder why they've never heard any of this information from their most trusted scholars and apologists, despite the information being right there in all of their most trusted sources. Hey Mo, I was reading some Islamic sources the other day and I read something that bothered me a little. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it if that's okay.
Of course, Ted. What was it that you were reading?
Great, thank you, Mo. Well, I was reading that Muhammad got caught having sex with his slave Maria in the bed of his wife Hafsa. His wives got upset about this though, so he promised to stop. That's when Muhammad got a new revelation in the Quran saying he could break his oath, allowing him in turn to go back to having sex with his slave girl. I know it was a different time back then, but I must admit, this doesn't feel quite right to me, coming from the perfect moral example. And it does also seem to me like the revelation is very convenient for Muhammad. I even watched a Yasir Qadhi lecture on this issue.
It's better you hear it from me than from others. And also, this is in the Quran. So you can't really this is a verse in the Quran. It is reported in al-Tabari that, and many other books of tafsir, that one day Hafsa went away and she was not going to be at home. And so the Prophet called Maria to the house of Hafsa. And it so happened that Hafsa returned earlier than she was supposed to, and she saw Maria leaving her house. She made the Prophet ﷺ promise to never ever see Maria again. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I have made her haram for myself. Yes, he wanted Maria, and he now wants to placate Hafsa, so he promises not to see. And he does not want Aisha to find out. Every husband here understands exactly the fear of a wife, what it can do. In reality, this is human nature. All of this is completely human. Right, Maria was a beautiful lady. Then what happens? Allah reveals in the Quran.
And, I mean, the Quran verse doesn't seem to serve any other purpose than to fulfill Muhammad's wishes and desires.
He's a human being, and he has desires, and those desires, he controls them in a halal manner. And there's nothing wrong with satisfying one's desires in a halal manner.
What are your thoughts on this?
But to me, to portray this picture and to give the real image, wallahi, to me, I can love and respect the Prophet even more.
While your Muslim friend likely won't admit it to you, you'll be living in their head rent-free with all the new information you're sharing with them. And whilst it might not happen overnight. Hey Mo, could you please explain Surah 33 verse 37 to me? I was reading the historical background, and apparently Muhammad caused his adopted son Zaid to get divorced after Zaid discovered Muhammad was lusting after his wife Zainab, who was also Muhammad's cousin. Muhammad then got a revelation from Allah saying he was meant to marry Zainab, and the reason he was meant to marry her was so that everyone else would know that it's okay to marry the divorced wife of your own adopted son. I must say, I've never actually met anyone who was wondering if they should be marrying the divorced wife of their own adopted son. But even so, wouldn't it be enough for Allah to just make a point about it, rather than needing Muhammad to actually go and marry Zainab? And over time, your Muslim friend will start looking for Islam's exit door. Right, so now it's over to you. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with a friend who has the opportunity to speak to Muslims, and then start having these conversations with your Muslim friends yourself. Remember, be respectful, be curious, but most of all, be informative. After all, if you'd been lied to about something your entire life and your friend knew the truth, wouldn't you expect them to share it with you?
If you liked this video, please remember to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you would like to see more videos like these, please also consider supporting me through Patreon.
Islam.